Roquan Smith headed to the Ravens for a second and fifth round pick. Obviously, this is of particular interest to me, but I think it's worth chewing on. Even if you didn't care about any of the teams involved, what is your initial reaction to Roquan heading to Baltimore?
I totally get it from the Bears standpoint. You're not going to pay him, and it's a little unsure how much you would have to pay him, right? It's going to be a big number, and do you want to do that at that position of the value you're building? So I understand it from their standpoint with the picks. I guess I trust the Ravens, right? They need defensive players, and they've always been good at kind of acquiring them and assimilating them, but I don't love the idea of anyone necessarily paying him if the franchise tag value is $18 million. Is that what we're talking about? That seems high to me.
I mean, obviously, a lot of those guys just got extensions. The Fred Warner deal, the Shaq Leonard deal, kind of pushing that number up there. And from what I understand, kind of the vague contours of the Roquan Smith conversation, he's going to want a deal that is a market-setting contract at that position. That's what he wanted this offseason, to be paid in line with those guys. And that's a lot of money to spend. It's a lot of money to spend at that position. If you look at the contracts that have been handed out for off-ball linebackers, they can go south pretty quickly. And the best ones have incredible impact on the game, like the Fred Warners and what they can do in coverage. But those contracts can look pretty outdated and come with some regrets pretty fast. And to pay somebody at the top of the market at that position, I can understand your hesitance in doing it if you're Ryan Poles. So now you have a second-round pick and a fifth-round pick in hand for trading him. If you were to let him walk in free agency, maybe there's a world where you get a third-round comp pick a year from now. That's not happening if you're the Bears. You have $100 million in cap space.
Yeah.
That cap space exists so you can go out and sign some free agents. Not only so you can sign some free agents, so we can talk about that, but those comp picks and that formula, it's going to get erased pretty fast when you start digging into the market next year. So now this gives you an extra second-round pick, an extra fifth-round pick, an extra fourth-round pick that you have from the Robert Quinn trade. On a value level, I totally understand it. You have flexibility to potentially trade one of those picks for players. What is Calvin Ridley going to cost this offseason? What is a team looking to unload maybe a bloated wide receiver contract going to look this offseason? Maybe none of those things happen, but that's what assets and cap space are for. You're never going to be able to spend $100 million in cap space in a single offseason. But if you can absorb a contract that another team doesn't necessarily want because of where they're at in their team building process, these are just examples, but the Bucs are $40 million over the cap right now. What if they're sitting there looking at their future next season and they think, you know what, Mike Evans is 30. Like, maybe we want to save some money by trading somebody like that, or they want to save some money by trading a Chris Godwin. These are all hypotheticals, but that's what you can do if you have cap space, and that's what you can do if you have draft picks. And those are the things that the Bears are building. They now have the resources to potentially build around their quarterback who desperately needs an upgrade in his supporting cast. So on that level, I totally understand it.
Yeah, and I think you're going to be selective about who you give a top of the market deal, right?
Correct.
If you're the new regime. So it's nothing personal against Roquan Smith, but they just may not want to do that when they have the option to not do it with him at that position. And he is a good player. I'm sure they would be better with him, but man, market setting. So what does that mean? 20 million a year if Fred Warner's at 19?
Yeah. And I think that's a lot.
Go get it from Baltimore.
So the only downside for me on the Bears side of this is if you're looking at it from a purely value-based perspective, I think it's a really good decision and an understandable move. But now in the span of a week, you've traded arguably your two best defensive players. So is tearing it down to this degree, are you worried about the message that it sends? Are you worried about what losing a lot of games is going to look like over the second half of the season? Just trying to play devil's advocate a little bit and not trying to see this as numbers on a spreadsheet the way that I sometimes can.
Yeah, so here's what I think. I think they feel much better the last 2 weeks about what they've got going on offense, right?
I agree.
He's come around. They're giving design rushes to Justin Fields. The offense was the best thing they had going against Dallas, and that's a good Dallas defense. So I think you're right to the extent that if the offense was still doing what it was doing 3 weeks ago, and every week was like, oh, geez, what are they doing? Fields is going to lose a leg out here. I mean, he was really getting smashed, and there was no direction. Then you offload good players when that's happening. What are you excited about? I think I'm with you that I think you need something to be excited about. And if we went into this season and I said, Robert, what's the one thing you want to be most excited about the second half of the season. You obviously would have said, I want to feel like Justin Fields is coming along. They've got a plan for him. I know that the weaponry is bad, but they're being smart. Our coordinator gets it. There's a plan. It's coming together, and we want to see more games. And as of the last 2 weeks, you want to see the Bears offense the second half of the season. The first half of the season, before that, it was hard to watch. So I think that maybe helps them make this move.
Yeah, I absolutely think it does. And I also think that sort of mindset where you want to build this thing through the offense. Like when you have all of these resources, you want to be able to try to go chase difference-making offensive players. There's opportunity cost if you're going to give an off-ball linebacker a market-setting contract. And now you have a second-round pick in hand and even more money to work with over the next couple of years. So what can you do with those assets? And I think it's about building up the infrastructure you have and the personnel that you have on offense. And now they have a lot of ammo to do that. You got to do it. And we'll see what those assets ultimately turn into. But I understand the thinking behind it.
Yeah. I think that's pretty good to get a 2 and a 5 when everyone might have already concluded you weren't going to pay them.
I agree. I again, on a purely value, let me do that again. 5, 4, 3. Purely on a value level, I completely understand it. If you're Baltimore is likely going to be a playoff team. They have not a hole at that position, but Josh Bynes is their other off-ball linebacker other than Patrick Queen. I think some of the stuff that Roquan can do is very different than what Patrick Queen is good at. Roquan is better in coverage. He's a better all-around linebacker than Patrick Queen is. Does this allow you to kind of use Patrick Queen in ways that are more conducive to his skill set? You get a guy like Josh Bynes, who's on a one-year deal anyway, I believe, off the field a little bit more often. I can grasp that from the Ravens' perspective because they definitely needed a little bit of jolt in the middle of their defense.
Yep, I completely agree. And if they're a team, like they have the easiest remaining schedule, if you just look at, opponent records, they have a little bit of an opportunity here, right? That division's open, and they've been a little up and down, to say the least, on defense, have trouble closing games. And you look around the league and you see these teams that perceive themselves to be in the mix. Certainly Philadelphia has been big in the last year making moves. I agree. I think Baltimore is a good team to try to do something.
I don't know what they're going to do with him. So now he's going in the final year of his deal. Do they want to give him a pretty big extension? Because now he's walking into whatever contract negotiations they have with some real leverage. I mean, they gave up 2 picks, including a second-round pick to go get him. Baltimore also has a decent amount of cap space next offseason. That is pending whatever happens with Lamar Jackson. But even if Lamar signs a franchise tag or some sort of extension that pushes his number down, are they going to be active enough in free agency where them losing him to the market and potentially putting it into a comp pick formula isn't as guaranteed as it might be for Baltimore in another season? So I'm wondering how they view him and how they view his future as part of this.
Best case scenario, they've had some initial discussions with the agent. They sort of know what he's looking for.
He doesn't have an agent, so that's
right. Yeah, you're right. Good point. Good point. You know what? They don't like dealing with agents. That's why they got Lamar. That's why they got Roquan Smith.
God. If it were, they would do anything for Lamar to have an agent right now.
Lamar to have an agent, yeah. So that is interesting though, because I think as an acquiring team, giving up a 2 and a 5 for somebody who, hey, wait, you want to go to the top of the market? I'm a little worried not having an agent because, shoot, it's less predictable, right? It's harder to reason with someone who's directly emotionally invested in the negotiation. You can't just say, hey, look, we're not interested in going there. Here's how we value you. It's a little harder to be honest, but I would hope from their standpoint that they have a decent feel that this is more than just a half season rental for a 2 and a 5 of a good player, but probably not a great player.